Hey everyone, it's Keith McGinnis with KCDC Designs out of Eagle, Nebraska. Wow, this is literally magical watching this granite come to life. So stay tuned and enjoy the video. The colors I'm going to be using is I have real teal, clay, which is a stone coat mica powder, deep silver, forest green, and that is copper, which is an Alumilite Copper. A little bit different mica powder, but is an Alumilite product. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going, oh boy, hope I got enough in there. All right, so I'm going to start off with some forest green that I just splattered all over. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start getting drops on the surface. And I want some fairly large drops. So as I'm getting the colors dropped onto the surface, I'll go into a little bit more detail. What I have in my spray bottles is, all of them are the Stone Coat mica powders, and they come in a bag. And it's 1/2 bag of mica powder to 8 ounces of 91% isopropyl alcohol. And you want to shake up your bottle really well as you're putting those drops and you're putting those colors down onto the surface. Now you'll see that I'm not completely going to cover that surface. I just want to make sure that I have all of my colors on there. And then after I get all of the colors on there, I take a look at it. I like where it's at. I may need to go back, add another color onto it if it got covered up too much. But you'll see that I'm not getting 100% coverage on there. And you'll see how that makes a difference as we get later on in the video. And just to clarify, when I say 1/2 bag of the Stone Coat mica powders, that's about 1/4 ounce of mica powder to 8 ounces of isopropyl alcohol. Now, in order to make this technique, this granification technique work, once that alcohol is completely dissipated and make sure that surface is completely dry, now you need to add a clear coat of epoxy over the top of that surface. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm using 3 ounces per square foot. And then I'm going to trowel that out to make sure I have complete even coverage. I'm going to trowel it, and then I'm going to torch my bubbles. And what's really important with this technique is you need to give that epoxy time to stop moving, to not be as fluid. For me personally, in my climate, and my studio maintains a temperature of 72 to 74 degrees with low humidity, I usually wait 20 to 30 minutes. Then I know that my epoxy is not as fluid. And so when I start the granification process, as those cells create, I know those cells aren't going to move too much. So you don't want to do this too early. You want to practice this and know what works for you as far as how long you're going to wait before you start that granification process. So be careful when you're troweling this out that you don't scratch the surface. So use that epoxy that you have on the surface as a lubricant as you go around and get your epoxy laid out. Okay, so with this technique, what's really important is once you get your black spray paint on there, you want to make sure that you get your alcohol dropped on there before your spray paint has had a chance to dry. So that being said, this is too large of an area to cover at one time. So I'm going to do this in sections, but I'll do this section, then I'm going to move down to this section because I want the alcohol that I'm dropping on here a chance to dissipate or evaporate before going on to this next section. So I'm only going to be using clear, but I want to have some copper accents in there, so I'm going to be using a little bit of copper as well. It's been about 30 minutes since I mixed the epoxy, and it's been on the surface for about 20 minutes. So let's see what happens. Again, all 4 edges are finished edges, so I want to make sure I get spray paint on my edges as well. All right, now it's time to start the fun stuff. Fart. Now it's time to fart. Oh, this editing of videos is almost too much. So now it's time to start the fun part. So I'm using Rust-Oleum gloss spray paint. Other gloss spray paints can work with Rust-Oleum colors. You just have to practice to find out what works. You also have to practice to determine how heavy to put that spray paint on. I like to put it on heavy because I want my cells to be more defined. And then it's really important to start the alcohol dropping process as soon as possible so that paint doesn't have a chance to dry.
Now we're going to get some alcohol dropped on there. And I want some fairly good sized drops. You need to come over here, Roger. That is just way too cool. Oh my goodness. Now it's also important to make sure that you don't put too much alcohol on the surface and give these cells a chance to develop, because they're going to continue to open up. So I've got my big drops on there, and then what I'm also going to do is get some smaller drops going on there as well. So I'm just going to lightly spritz, and then I want to get some copper in there also, because those copper accents are going to look really cool.
I'm going to talk about this more here in just a little bit, but you have to be really, really cautious when you're using metallics in your alcohol with this technique, because those metallics can cause those cells to really, really grow and get too large. So be cautious of that. And again, I'm just using that as accents.
Barely pull the trigger so my drops are a little bit bigger. And it's really tempting to keep going because you see a lot of open areas here, and you really have a temptation to fill those in like I'm doing right now, but you really need to just let everything develop. So I'm going to let that go, except for maybe just another drop right in there. Looks like I still have some gold in my glove. Yeah, I'm just going to let that go. All right. We're going to come down to this end.
So as I continue on to the next section, I want to make some really important points. For one, you have to decide what you want your undercoat color to be. When I first did a sample board, I used black as my undercoat paint, but it did not bring out the vibrance of the colors. White was too bright, so I mixed some black and some white to create a gray, and that's what I have as my undertone paint, is a gray base. That's what really brought out, in my opinion, the vibrance of the colors that I was using on this particular piece. Here again, I'm going to the opposite side of the countertop to fracture next, and the reason I'm doing that is because that alcohol on the right side is still wet, and I don't want to add alcohol onto alcohol. So I will go back and forth until I get to the centerpiece, which I'll get to right after this. When I put that alcohol in my hand, you can see how I'm kind of bouncing it up and down, and I'm allowing those drops and those droplets to hit the surface. There's actually a name for that. Let's listen in.
So somebody in our reciters group has coined this the Italian drip, because you're So, yes, I am now performing the Italian drip.
That's funny.
Okay, so now we're going to get just a little bit of the copper in there.
So I want to go back and talk about the caution of using alcohol or using metallics, the mica powders, of doing this technique. So I'm primarily using clear alcohol. I am using the copper, which is the metallic mica powder, as only as an accent. But if you use too much of the metallic mica powders, what happens is those metallics want to push out on those cells and cause those cells to get really, really large. So be cautious of how much metallic mica powder that you're going to use on the surface. I'm going to show a picture of the edges, and you can see how those cells are starting to kind of drop down over the edges. One thing that I did not do that I would recommend is fog your edges with like colors. Similar colors that you're using on this design, fog your edges with those colors, because as that alcohol runs down that edge, a lot of what's going to show is just your undercoat, which in my case was the gray color. Had I fogged those edges with those like colors, those colors would be showing through opposed to the solid gray. So just a note on your edges, when you were going to do this technique, fog your edges with similar colors. So now I'm kind of wrapping up, and I'm just kind of taking an overall assessment of how everything looks. That area right there on the right, remember how many black empty spaces there were, but how much that's filled in since those cells have developed. So again, you got to really be patient with this technique and give that some time, and don't put too much alcohol on there. Actually, you can go back for any spaces, even 5-10 minutes later after spraying the spray paint on there. You can still go and put drops in those little areas just by getting your bottle really close like that, just like what I'm doing there. And watch how that is still going to open up and still going to develop. So be very, very patient with this technique. It's amazing.
I'm not going to torch this again. So I torched it 3 times when I put the clear coat on there to eliminate any air bubbles that were in there. I really didn't incorporate any air bubbles by the technique of what I just did with the spray paint and dropping the isopropyl alcohol on there. But I don't want to put a torch to that because I don't want to make that epoxy, I don't want to make that fluid again. So everything is really staying in place. All of the cells are staying very, very defined. I'm really, really pleased with how well defined the cells are. They stayed together, and where that comes from is not putting too much alcohol on there. If you put too much alcohol on there, those cells are going to form and they're going to look really, really cool for the first couple minutes, and then all of a sudden they're all just going to run together and you're not going to have those defined cells. So the amount of spray paint that you put down is going to help give that defined cell. And then also getting your alcohol put down on there before your spray paint has had a chance to dry. And then most importantly is not using too much alcohol. It'll be interesting to go back with the video of when I did this section and how much empty space or black space that there was in this area to right now. And the video's been running for 22 minutes. So from the time I put the clear coat on there to the time where I was done with the last Italian drip was probably 15 minutes, because it's been at least a good 5 to 7 minutes since we've been done.
Yeah.
But how it's developed over that period of time. So I'll make a point when I edit the video to kind of focus in on this area and then go back to this area again to see how long did that take, and to be able to watch those develop as well as the rest of it. So, all right. This is weird. I'm not used to walking away after 15 minutes. It's usually 2 hours and I'm still trying to figure out what else I want to do next. But man, that is really, really pretty.
There's nothing to add.
No, I don't want to do anything else to it. It's got enough alcohol on it. There's enough small cells. There's enough large cells. None of them got humongous, which can happen. There's a big one there, but it's almost like there's small ones inside of it. It looks like an alien. 2 eyes and the nose. All right, this is weird, but I'm done. I'm gonna walk away.
So 24 hours later, I applied a flood coat. And then after the flood coat, then I applied the Ultimate Top Coat Gloss. And I do have a video on how I applied that Ultimate Top Coat Gloss. Just look at those cells. Really, really turned out nice. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you learned something. Please let me know if you have any questions on this technique. Again, this is Keith McGinnis with KCDC Designs. Please subscribe to my channel for upcoming tutorials. Thanks everybody. Take care and have a good one.